Imagine your morning routine for a second. You wake up, maybe take like a daily allergy pill or an antidepressant.
Right.
You wash your face with one of those exfoliating scrubs. And then, I don't know, maybe later you spray a bit of weed killer on the driveway before leaving for work.
Just completely mundane, everyday action.
Exactly. Completely mundane. But let's look at the invisible chemical footprint left behind there. Because where do those synthetic compounds actually go after they wash down your drain or, run off your lawn?
Well, I mean, the historical assumption, which is frankly the most comfortable one, is that they just sort of disappear into the vastness of the water system.
Out of sight, out of mind, right?
Yeah, exactly. But the environmental monitoring data we have right now just completely shatters that illusion.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Because today we are diving into a massive 2026 review. It was published in Discover Environment by Safali and colleagues. And the mission of this deep dive is to look at these incredibly subtle, often totally invisible threats known as emerging pollutants, or EPs, in our aquatic ecosystems.
Right, the EPs.
Yeah. And we're looking at how they impact everything from, like, microscopic plankton all the way up to massive marine mammals. And obviously what this means for the future of our water. I mean, when I think of water pollution, my brain immediately conjures up an oil spill or some industrial pipe dumping neon green sludge.
Sure, yeah, the classic cartoon pollution.
Right. But this review focuses on the microscopic chemical footprint of modern life.
Yeah, and the term emerging is the critical distinction here. Like, we aren't dealing with the highly regulated, heavy industrial pollutants of the 1970s anymore. We are really analyzing the everyday outputs of contemporary living.
Which means what exactly?
Well, it means complex molecules that our aquatic ecosystems possess literally zero evolutionary defense against. And the source material categorizes these into several terrifyingly common buckets, actually.
Okay, lay them on me.
So first, you have PPCPs, which are pharmaceuticals and personal care products. That covers your antibiotics, anti-inflammatories like ibuprofen, and, hormones from birth control. Then there are EDCs, or endocrine-disrupting chemicals.
Like BPA, right? Bisphenol A from plastic.
Exactly. BPA is a big one. Add in microplastics, nanoplastics, pesticides like glyphosate, heavy metals, and, of course, the infamous forever chemicals, PFAS.
See, I always assumed the municipal wastewater treatment plant just took care of this. And we literally build these multi-million-dollar infrastructure projects specifically to clean the water we use before it hits the river.
You think so, yeah.
But, like, a fact from the paper that absolutely floored me is that conventional treatment plants actually fail to completely remove these pharmaceuticals and personal care products.
Yeah, and the chemistry of why they fail is actually quite straightforward. You see, conventional treatment plants were engineered decades ago.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and they were engineered to handle biological organic waste. So human waste, bacteria, easily degradable matter, they utilize these biological breakdown stages that do an exceptional job at that specific task.
But they weren't built for modern chemicals.
Exactly. Those engineered bacteria just cannot break the robust synthetic bonds found in modern chemistry. For instance, PFAS compounds feature carbon-fluorine bonds.
These are super strong, right?
They are some of the strongest bonds in organic chemistry. A standard biological filter cannot even touch them. So residual hormones, dissolved antibiotics, and nanoplastics, they simply pass right through the filtration stages and flow directly into our waterways.
Wow. Okay, so that handles what goes down the drain. But the review emphasizes that direct pipes, what they call point source pollution, that's not even the whole story.
Not even close.
Yeah, the non-point sources seem much harder to control. Like, we were talking about agricultural runoff sweeping fertilizers into streams, or landfill leachate seeping into groundwater, and urban stormwater carrying oil and microplastics straight from the asphalt to the ocean.
Right, because non-point sources are decentralized, which makes them a total regulatory nightmare. But the paper outlines a pathway that is even more difficult to contain, which is atmospheric deposition. Wait, atmospheric, like the sky?
Yes. Certain pollutants, like persistent organic pollutants or mercury, can actually volatilize.
Wait, really? So they essentially turn into a gas or like hitch a ride on microscopic airborne dust?
That's exactly what happens.
So my flame retardant couch or my car's exhaust could literally travel through the global wind currents and rain down on a fish thousands of miles away.
Well, what's fascinating here is how the physical and chemical properties of these pollutants, specifically their volatility and polarity, allow them to completely bypass traditional environmental barriers.
That is wild.
It is. We are finding measurable levels of modern industrial chemicals in pristine, completely remote areas like Antarctica.
So it's essentially like the water cycle we learned about in grade school, but weaponized.
A weaponized water cycle. That's a great way to put it. It proves that aquatic pollution is a truly borderless issue. Like, you cannot fence off a wildlife preserve and expect it to stay clean if the threat is arriving via the clouds.
Okay, I have to push back a little here, though.
Sure. If these chemicals were arriving via rain clouds or trickling out of decentralized storm drains, aren't they getting incredibly diluted? Like, the ocean is massive, a lake is massive, a few dissolved allergy pills surely get watered down to the point of being totally harmless.
Yeah, the concept that the solution to pollution is dilution has been the prevailing dogma for a century.
Right.
But it ignores a fundamental trait of these specific chemicals. Many of them are lipophilic.
Meaning they love to bind to fats and lipids rather than just staying dissolved in the water.
Precisely the problem.
Right.
Because they are lipophilic, they aren't easily metabolized or excreted by living organisms. When a fish absorbs these chemicals, whether that's through its gills or its diet, the compounds migrate straight to the fish's fat tissues and lodge there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the organism takes in the pollutant faster than its body can expel it. This is bioaccumulation. The animal essentially becomes a chemical sink.
So it's basically a chemical game of Pac-Man. Yeah, like every contaminated ghost you eat adds to your own toxic score.
Yeah.
And because you can't clear the board, the biggest fish in the pond is essentially swimming hazardous waste.
That is actually a highly accurate way to visualize biomagnification. As we move up the trophic levels, the math becomes just staggering.
Walk me through that.
So, phytoplankton absorbed trace contaminants from the water. Then, zooplankton eat thousands of phytoplankton.
Right.
Small fish eat thousands of zooplankton, and so on. The lipid-binding nature of these chemicals forces the concentration to multiply exponentially at every single step.
So it just builds and builds.
Exactly. By the time you reach an apex predator, like a tuna or a shark, the chemical concentration in its tissue can be millions of times higher than the surrounding water.
Which is exactly why scientists rely on those apex predators as bioindicators. Like, if you want to know the true cumulative toxic load of an ecosystem, testing the water only gives you a snapshot of that exact moment.
Right, it's just a snapshot.
But testing the top predator gives you the historical biological record of every pollutant in the entire food web below them. And of course, since humans eat from the very top of that aquatic food web, that toxic record circles right back onto our dinner plates.
It is a closed loop, unfortunately. But to fully grasp the ecological damage, we have to look below the apex predators. The review details how these pollutants don't inflict, like, a generic uniform damage across all species.
Meaning different animals react differently.
Exactly. The specific physiological makeup of an animal dictates its unique vulnerability.
Right, a microplastic doesn't harm an oyster the exact same way an endocrine disruptor harms a frog.
Yeah.
So let's look at the mechanisms of how these varied species uniquely suffer.
Let's do it.
If we start with feeding and respiration, mollusks like clams, oysters, and mussels, they are fascinating. They are the natural water vacuums of the ecosystem, filtering massive volumes of water.
Right.
Well, here's where it gets really interesting. Because that exact survival trait turns into a fatal flaw in a polluted environment.
Yeah, because they are non-selective filter feeders. They pull in whatever is suspended in the water column. So when they ingest microplastics, those particles occupy physical space in their digestive tracts, but offer literally zero nutritional value.
So they're just full of plastic.
Yes, and the biological result is something called false satiation.
Wow. Their stomachs are physically full of plastic, so their neurological drive to eat just shuts off, and they literally starve to death with a full stomach.
Exactly, while also suffering physical abrasion to their gills, which plummets their filtration efficiency even more. Now, contrast that feeding vulnerability with a circulatory vulnerability.
Okay.
Crustaceans, so crabs, shrimp, crayfish, they have an open circulatory system. Instead of blood being confined to a network of closed veins and arteries like we have as mammals, their organs are directly bathed in a fluid called hemolymph.
So there are no localized barriers. Once a contaminant breaches their system, it's basically a freeway straight to every major organ simultaneously.
Yes, and what's fascinating here is how that open system accelerates the timeline of damage. They experience rapid immunotoxicity and severe hepatopancreatic organ damage much faster than organisms with closed circulatory systems.
Simply because the chemical distribution is instantaneous.
Precisely.
So that covers the physical traits. But the review spends a significant amount of time on the biochemical hijacking happening beneath the surface, specifically with the nervous and endocrine systems.
This part is crucial.
Like, take a common pesticide like chlorpyrifos. When fish are exposed to it, it doesn't just make them generically sick. It surgically targets an enzyme called acetylcholinesterase, or ACE.
Right, and ACE is a critical off switch for nerve signals. When a fish's brain tells a muscle to move, a chemical messenger fires across the synapse. ACE is the enzyme that clears that messenger away so the muscle can relax.
Got it.
So chlorpyrifos actually inhibits ACE. Without that enzyme, the nerve just fires continuously. Yeah, it is a biological short circuit. It results in paralysis, violent spasms, and behavioral dysfunction that makes the fish incredibly vulnerable to predation.
And we see a totally different kind of hijacking in amphibians. I mean, frogs and toads are famously sensitive, especially during early development, because their metamorphosis from aquatic tadpole to terrestrial adult is entirely governed by thyroid hormones.
Right, and endocrine disrupting chemicals, or EDCs, are molecular mimics.
It's a mix.
Yeah, they are shaped just similarly enough to natural hormones that they can actually bind to cellular receptors.
Sneaky.
Very. When a tadpole is exposed to EDCs, those synthetic chemicals can block real thyroid hormones or trigger receptors at the completely wrong time. The result is delayed metamorphosis, skewed sex ratios, and severe morphological deformities.
Like altered limb development.
Exactly.
But beyond the hormonal and nervous systems, the source highlights a universal mechanism of damage that happens at the fundamental cellular level across almost all these species.
Oxidative stress.
Yes, oxidative stress. The review talks about pollutants triggering an overproduction of reactive oxygen species, or ROS. Break that down for us, because reactive oxygen species sounds like a bunch of scientific jargon, but it's actually a very destructive process.
Yeah, so normal cellular metabolism naturally produces a small amount of ROS, which are basically unstable molecules missing an electron.
Okay.
The body has antioxidant enzymes like SOD and CR designed to neutralize them. But exposure to these emerging pollutants forces the cells to massively overproduce ROS.
Which completely overwhelms the animal's natural antioxidant defense.
Exactly.
So these unstable molecules just run rampant, violently stealing electrons from healthy cellular structures to stabilize themselves. It's essentially biological rust.
Biological rust is a perfect way to describe it, actually. It damages lipid membranes, denatures proteins, and most alarmingly causes genotoxicity.
Meaning damage to the DNA itself.
Yeah, literal physical damage to the DNA strands, leading to mutations and severe cellular apoptosis or cell death.
And to add one final layer of tragedy to this whole kingdom under siege, the review highlights aquatic mammals.
Right, the dolphins and whales.
Yeah. They suffer from the bioaccumulation we discussed earlier because they live for decades,
Right.
but they also experience transgenerational transfer. Because they nourish their young internally and through milk, a mother who has accumulated a lifetime of toxic burden unknowingly offloads those concentrated lipophilic pollutants directly into her calf.
Through the placenta and her lipid-rich milk.
Exactly. So the next generation begins life fundamentally compromised.
Yeah, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, none of these impacts occur in isolation. A disrupted thyroid gene in a frog or an ACE inhibition in a fish, it snowballs.
Right. Yeah.
Cellular damage leads to behavioral changes. Behavioral changes lead to reproductive failure. Reproductive failure leads to population collapse, which ultimately destabilizes the entire food web.
Now, reading through all these terrifying biological impacts, a listener might naturally assume our lakes are just thick with pure toxic sludge. You'd think we are swimming in milligrams of raw pharmaceuticals based on this.
So that sounds apocalyptic.
But the environmental monitoring data in the source tells a different story. In the real world, these emerging pollutants are present at tiny trace levels. We're talking nanograms or micrograms per liter.
Very small amounts, yeah.
And the lab tests historically used acute, high doses to force a reaction. But reality is much subtler. So, wait, if we're only dealing with a few nanograms of an endocrine disruptor, why should we care? Isn't ringing the alarm bell over trace amounts just fear-mongering?
Well, this raises an important question, and it represents a massive paradigm shift in toxicology.
How so?
For decades, regulations were built entirely around acute toxicity, determining the exact dose required to kill a fish immediately.
The lethal dose.
Right. But in the wild, organisms are rarely exposed to lethal, acute doses. Instead, they face chronic, lifelong, low-dose exposure to a complex mixture of interacting chemicals.
So it's not a sudden poison. It's more like a computer running way too many intensive background apps.
I like that.
Like, no single app crashes the operating system immediately, but they are constantly draining the battery, heating up the processor, and slowing everything down until eventually the whole system just freezes and shuts down.
That analogy perfectly captures the concept of sublethal stress. A nanogram of a pesticide won't kill a zebrafish today. But over 3 years, that continuous background stress depletes its immune system, slightly alters its swimming speed so it can't escape predators as effectively.
And maybe lowers its sperm count just enough that the local population stops replacing itself.
Exactly. It is a slow-motion biological breakdown over generations.
And we cannot talk about environmental stressors without addressing the massive force multiplier, which is climate change. The review points out a deeply dangerous synergy between rising water temperatures and chemical toxicity.
Yeah, because ectothermic animals, like fish and amphibians, have body temperatures that match their environment.
Cold-blooded, right?
Right. As global water temperatures rise, their basal metabolic rates speed up. To fuel that higher metabolism, they require more oxygen, which means they must pump significantly more water across their gills.
Oh, I see. So the warmer the water, the more actively they're filtering and absorbing the surrounding pollutants.
Exactly. And concurrently, the chemical toxicity of many pollutants actually increases at higher temperatures.
Double whammy.
Yeah. And if you combine that with climate-induced hypoxia, so low oxygen levels often caused by algae blooms, the aquatic organism is already pushed to its absolute physiological limit.
Wow.
When you introduce a trace chemical stressor to an animal that's already suffocating and overheating, its resilience is virtually zero.
Okay, so we are facing a chronic climate-multiplied threat of invisible pollutants. They're arriving from the sky and the storm drains, accumulating in the fat of animals, and slowly degrading entire populations at the cellular level.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. So how do scientists and policymakers actually fight an enemy they can barely see? I mean, we can't just wait for a population of tuna to go extinct to realize our wastewater treatment is inadequate.
No, we can't. We have to completely overhaul our approach to ecological risk assessment. We are shifting from reactive autopsies to proactive preventative diagnoses. And the review highlights the critical role of omics technologies.
Omics?
Yeah, genomics, transcriptomics, proteomics, and metabolomics.
Okay, let's ground that in reality. So instead of counting dead fish in a river, scientists are utilizing high-resolution mass spectrometry and advanced biosensors to track the trace concentrations in the water.
Exactly.
But more importantly, omics allows them to read the biological alarm bells inside a living animal.
Yes. By analyzing a fish's gene expression, toxicologists can identify specific biomarkers of exposure.
Like what?
For example, if they see the rapid upregulation of a specific gene, like CYP1A, they know the fish's liver is desperately trying to metabolize a toxic hydrocarbon.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they can detect the cellular stress pathways activating long before the fish exhibits any physical signs of illness. It provides an early warning system.
That's incredible. But detecting the problem is only half the battle. The physical solutions outlined in the review demand some heavy lifting. I mean, you can't just mandate that humans stop using pharmaceuticals or plastics overnight.
Right. That's just not realistic.
No. So the paper pushes hard for integrated approaches, specifically upgrading our wastewater infrastructure with advanced technologies. They mention membrane bioreactors and activated carbon adsorption. How do those actually catch what current biological filters miss?
Well, a conventional system relies primarily on gravity and bacteria. A membrane bioreactor takes that biological degradation and combines it with ultrafiltration.
Ultrafiltration.
Yeah, it forces the water through microscopic sieves, pores so small they are measured in nanometers. This physically blocks nanoplastics and larger synthetic molecules.
And activated carbon.
Activated carbon adsorption works differently. Activated carbon is engineered to have a massive, incredibly porous surface area. As water passes through, chemical pollutants like PFAS or pharmaceutical residues physically stick or adsorb to the carbon surface.
So we are essentially trapping the complex synthetics that the bacteria just can't digest.
Exactly.
But the ultimate solution isn't just building better filters, right?
Yeah.
It's rethinking the chemistry itself. The review emphasizes an urgent shift toward green chemistry.
Yes, green chemistry is vital.
Like if we know a chemical is going to inevitably end up in the environment, We need to design its molecular bonds so that they naturally degrade when exposed to sunlight or natural microbes, rather than persisting for thousands of years.
And that requires intense interdisciplinary collaboration. Toxicologists must work alongside chemical engineers to design better products from the start. Policymakers must implement stricter regulations based on chronic omics data, not just acute lethality. And the agricultural and industrial sectors, well, they must adopt sustainable management practices to prevent non-point source runoff in the first place.
So, what does this all mean for you, the listener? You might not feel a deep personal connection to the thyroid function of a tadpole or the false satiation of a distant oyster. But protecting these obscure aquatic organisms ultimately protects human health.
Absolutely.
They form the foundational pillars of the ecosystem services we rely entirely upon: our food supply, the natural purification of our drinking water, and global climate regulation. If the bottom of the food web quietly collapses under the weight of our invisible chemical footprint, the entire structure holding up human survival goes with it.
It forces us to confront the true cost of modern convenience. The chemicals that afford us incredible benefits, disease treatment, agricultural yield, durable goods, they carry an ecological debt that is currently being paid by aquatic biodiversity.
And that leads perfectly to a final thought I want to leave you to mull over. Humanity spends a massive amount of time, energy, and media attention agonizing over what we are aggressively taking out of our oceans. Things like overfishing, which is undeniably a huge problem.
Right.
But perhaps the true, insidious existential threat to aquatic life isn't just the resources we extract. Perhaps it is the invisible, microscopic chemical footprint we are quietly, daily putting in. Thank you for joining us in this episode exploring the toxicological implications of emerging pollutants on aquatic organisms. We hope this discussion has provided valuable insights into the hidden threats facing aquatic ecosystems and the importance of advancing scientific research, environmental monitoring, and sustainable management practices. Protecting our rivers, lakes, wetlands, estuaries, and oceans is not only essential for aquatic biodiversity, but also for the health and well-being of future generations. We appreciate your time and interest, and we look forward to having you with us in our next scientific discussion. Until then, stay curious, stay informed, and keep supporting science for a sustainable future.